Hello, everybody, and welcome back to yet another episode of Against All Odds. And as I say at the beginning of every podcast, it's purely selfish reasons why I record this podcast because I get to speak to inspirational people. And today I am so excited to introduce Dr. Karen Bright. How are you, my lovely?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm good. We had some technical problems to start with, but we've fixed it. The Wi-Fi is on our side now.
Hopefully.
Now, I love the work that you do because you help people through grief and loss, and that's such valuable work that you do. And I always say to people when they're impacting people in a positive way that you're doing, that you've always got a big why to what you do. You don't just stumble into a job role like that. So my first question to everybody, and including you tonight, is what is your big why?
My big why is because I don't want people to kind of go through what I went through. I could have done with me back in the day. So my sort of background for your audience is that just over 2 years ago, my husband David died quite suddenly.
Mm,
And as you can imagine, felt like the rug had been pulled up from underneath me, and it was awful and everything you can imagine. And it took me a while to kind of find myself again and feel that it was all right to look to the future. It was all right to make plans and not feel guilty and not feel bad and not feel like there was no hope. And so I think that I could have done with somebody, like I say, like me, who could have sat me down, helped me through this,
yeah,
also kind of worked with me to say, right, okay, so what does your future hold? Again, it's not a future you would have chosen,
yeah,
but let's start to work toward that. And I hope that that's what I give people now.
yeah. So is it a struggle for you? Well, obviously it was being, and she said you needed yourself back then. And I think a lot of people, there's not a lot of help for people that are grieving. And if there is, you really have to go and search for it. Why is that when it's a natural thing that happens. So why is there a lack of kind of information for people out there?
I don't know. I felt like, well, I went to my GP about something else. I can't remember what it was now. And she was very supportive and everything. And I got a telephone number for talking, health talking, something talking.
Yeah.
Which was a phone call with some kind of counselor. And I had a few phone calls and it just wasn't working for me. And to be fair, she gave me lots of information. So there were walking groups looking at things that I was interested in, but it still just wasn't kind of connecting because what did I need? I needed people around me
Yeah.
who, again, were more looking at the future. So counseling and talking therapy. It feels like all you're doing is going over and over and over the problem. And, lots of people talk about if you are, say, anxious, you don't want to spend a lot of time with a lot of anxious people because this is all you can think about. And I wanted to looked for a different way. So again, back in the day, it took me a while, but I started to self-coach. So applying all of the things that my coach that I had worked with before was doing. So again, but it's more gentle. And I think that a lot of the kind of things that are available seem to be based around the past and the actual issue
Yes.
rather than helping to support somebody look to the future. I never like to say moving forward because it feels like you're leaving the person behind, but kind of like moving forward in your own life now.
Yeah. Yeah. Because that, I suppose that does come with a layer of guilt, like you said, which is odd, really. Would you say fear is in that as well? Because we don't plan a life on our own when we're together with somebody. That doesn't even kind of enter our heads. So there must be a level of fear there as well.
Absolutely, on so many levels, Amy. I mean, I just became obsessed with death, like
Right.
everything to do with death, and wanted to read about death and wanted to know more about death. And it just became a bit of a fixation that I knew I needed to kind of get out of, but I couldn't. And it felt like that, in a strange way, that was kind of like a security blanket for me. to
Yeah.
maybe better understand death and what happens when you die. Um, and it took me a while again to kind of talk myself out of this and to step back from this kind of like just subsuming kind of, well, it's grief, it still is grief, but just this absolute obsession with all things death, and to just think, I can't bring David back.
Yeah.
I can't have the life that we had planned, and therefore I need now to kind of change my whole thinking around
Mm.
what happens now with me, and how to rebuild our life,
Yeah.
a different life. And like you say, you don't think about it.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
like, if you're in a partnership, you're talking and you're planning your life to get your holidays and what you're going to do, where you're going to go. And then suddenly that person's not there, and it kind of changed, I wouldn't say my whole identity, but it changed the way that I was kind of looking at life. One positive I would say that came out of it is that I don't delay anything now. I don't go, I'll do it next week, because we had things that we were always gonna do. We're going to go
Yes.
here, we're going to do that, and we didn't get the chance. And so now, if I think I'm going to do something, I'm going to go on a trip, I'm going to go somewhere, I'm going to go and see friends, I get it in the diary and do it pretty much straight away. I don't mess about anymore.
Yeah. It's like that old saying, isn't it? Like, you don't know what's around the corner. And I think sometimes we're a bit blasé about that until something happens to us personally. Even though we know life's fragile, we know that, but we still seem to take it with a pinch of salt. So unless something awful happens, that's kind of what kicks you up the bum to
For
do
sure.
that.
For sure. I think also I started to accept my own mortality, because I've always been kind of like, yeah, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to be this. And like, you don't think about your own death date. But again, as
Yeah.
kind of even just part of that kind of obsessing about death. But then suddenly, like you say, tomorrow's not guaranteed. All of those cliches, but it's true.
Yeah. Well, we take
And
it with,
so,
well,
kind
yeah,
of like,
yeah.
live for today, do what you need to do. Not like I don't live recklessly,
Mm,
because I think that just like is going to take me, perhaps, I don't go speeding around and all of that, but just doing things like now. And again, it's kind of like that no regrets.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Now you did a post, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, when you said like there's no rule book on how long to grieve. I think that's a big thing for people as well, because I think around that time you're trying to work things out, everything's kind of up in the air, and I know some people distract themselves quite a lot. I've known somebody do this recently, where it's like, I'm not even thinking that, I'm really going to distract myself and do it that way. And then other people, like, they're emotional, and rightly so, for longer. Like, there's no kind of rule book, and everybody acts differently, don't they?
Absolutely. I think as well, when you're in it, and even when you're around people, there is this kind of element of, well, it's been a certain length of time. And for me, it's just turned 2 years past July. And people might not be saying it, but there's kind of like this implicit, well, it's been 2 years, you should be over it by now.
Yeah.
You should be getting on with your life. You should be doing this. And I am getting on with my life, but I still grieve. And it was a few weeks ago. Um, I really got a right slap around the chops with grief. It just came out of nowhere. 3 consistent days, subsequent days, just like it was coming up and just crying. And I just let it go. I don't kind of hold it in. And that really knocked me for six. And I think when we're talking to people, we do sometimes still kind of we get impatient with them. You should be through this by now. You should be past.
Yeah.
And I always use there's a Kubler-Ross grief curve. Again, you might have heard of the various stages of grief. And I tend to work with people and say, look, this is an idea of things that you might be feeling. It's not a timeline. We don't have a timeline on it. And at any point you can go back. So you
Mm.
can kind of go all the way through and then up on the other side of it and go like, do you know what? I'm living life. I'm getting on. I'm actually quite happy. And I don't feel guilty about feeling happy. But then the next day, you could be right back down in the pit, absolutely sobbing your heart out.
Yeah, yeah. There's no kind of rule, and I think that's why people are quite hard on themselves, that feel like they're having a step backwards. But I always say to people, we are human at the end of the day, and we are designed to feel all emotions, even the ones that don't make us feel very nice, and that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think, I don't know whether it's a Brit thing, like they'll stiff up a lip kind of thing.
I think it is. And I think, again, I touched it, well, maybe months ago now, I lose track of time, but it's very much about kind of like around the world, we grieve differently. As
Yeah,
Brits, we tend to kind of suppress it because we shouldn't show that emotion. At a funeral, we should have a few tears and then that's it.
yeah,
Whereas in other cultures, it's really like rendering of garments and sobbing and wailing, and that's acceptable. And that's kind of like just letting, it's like purging, letting it all hang out. And I would say it's difficult, I think, again, as Brits, if we're talking to somebody who is grieving and they're not following the pattern that we're expecting, as in it's 2 years, so they shouldn't be crying anymore. They should be getting on with their life, for example.
yeah. I was about to ask you about that. Like people around you 2 years ago, did they know how to deal with it? Because you people change towards you, don't they? If it's, how did you deal with that? Because it could be nice on one hand and then really annoying on the other.
Yeah, yeah. Again, I mean, prior to David dying, I've been to funerals and I've been around people who, and when you're the other side of it, you realize what people do. You get the head tilt.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
I'm really sorry. And people are, and we don't know what to say. That's part of
No,
it. We have those, I'm sorry for your loss, my deepest sympathies, my deepest condolences. If there's anything I can do, just reach out. But sometimes as Brits, we don't actually mean that.
yeah, yeah.
I'm going to offer because I feel like I should. But actually, if you knocked on my door and said, oh my God, I just need a hug, we'd be mortified.
Yeah,
And the other thing I think, sort of like just elaborating on this point a bit, was something that I found, again, I've been guilty of it before, but when you're actually in the middle of it, is that there's a lot of support, a lot of people contacting you, dropping in and everything up until the person's funeral. And then probably maybe for a week or two afterwards,
right.
people get on with their lives.
Yes.
And they've been touched by this person, and then and been there, done it with other people. But when you're the person who's left,
Yeah,
then every single day you have to wake up without your partner, get on with your day without your partner. You don't have the chats that you'd have if you're watching a television program. You can't have a chat about that. You're not talking about your day.
yeah,
Then that can start to feel really lonely. And then I think from other people's point of view, there comes a point when then they don't know what to say.
yes,
So they've had all of those kind of 2 weeks of, oh my God, I'm only here for you, blah, blah, blah. I can help you. I'm really sorry. And then it's radio silence. And then they don't know how to contact you again because they don't know what to say.
yeah, yeah. Like I say, there's no rule book for the person going through it or the people that are around them. So it's all, and you're so right. When somebody passes away, nobody knows what to say for the best, and we've kind of just got these generic lines that we come out with, isn't it?
Yeah.
They're like written somewhere. I don't know where they're written, but we've all read them, like, because we all do it. Like
Yeah.
you touched on loneliness there.
Mm.
Now, when my mum lost my stepdad back in 2019, that was something that she struggled with massively. And I think that is a big, in the work I do, it's like the new pandemic is loneliness. How do you how do you start to process that and get out of that? Because you do have to kind of put yourself out your comfort zone a little bit, don't you? Which again is scary.
Mm. I think I'm fortunate in that I am naturally outgoing and positive,
Mm,
and I'm happy. Prior to David, I've always been somebody who's happy in my own company. I do things on my own. From sort of being a teenager, I'd go to restaurants, I'd go on holiday on my own, cafe, I'd go to the theatre, I'd go to cinema on my own. So I don't have any kind of stigma or issues around that. but that was my choice.
Yes.
It's different when suddenly you have to do that. But still, for me, having that positive, generally positive attitude anyway, excuse me, I've got a cold. And also, here's the irony, or the kicker, 5 days before David died, we went to pick up a puppy. And so,
Okay.
so I was grieving, and I had this little bundle. He's a spaniel as well. So I
Oh,
had this little bundle, and he kind of helped but didn't. So it was, and I was kind of so close on so many occasions to taking him back to the breeder and just going, like, I can't deal with that. But the positive side around that was that once he was able to go out, after all these injections, I had to get up. I had to go for a walk with him. I had to play with him. I had to do training with him. And so that kind of forced me on days when I was just sitting thinking, I just don't want to. I want to wallow. I want a little pity party here.
yeah.
That changed everything. It meant I had to go out. And when you're out and about, dog walkers, they always say hello. And we
Hmm.
always know the dogs' names. We don't know everyone else, their owners' names.
Yeah, yeah,
So loneliness is a thing, but again, we all deal with it differently. But I do remember still, like the hardest time for me was the first Christmas. So
yeah.
I'd done what we would usually do is go up and spend time with all the family. So I don't have children. I have a stepdaughter from David, but she lives 150 miles away as well. My family are all 150 odd miles away. So I'd been up for Christmas, seen everybody, came back on the 27th of December, and I didn't see a soul until into January when I took the dog back to school.
Right.
And that was hard. That was I've never felt so lonely in my entire life,
Yeah,
really, because everyone else, they're with their family. It's Christmas time. They've got their own traditions. All of my friends have family either here or again in other places in the country. And that really was hard. That really was
yeah,
hard. But what it made me do is think that I can still go out. So I could still go into nearby towns. I don't necessarily have to know anybody and meet people for coffee, but just getting out and walking around where there are people.
yeah, yeah,
And again, having a dog, somebody even without a dog will start to go, oh, who's this? What's their name? Blah, blah, blah. So at
mm,
least you're having some kind of contact with strangers.
yeah, yeah. That's it, because we're not designed to be isolated, are we? We're designed to have human interaction. A number of people I've spoke to that have lost people. I mean, you've got to think COVID has been horrific. You know, a lot of people were grieving people that went far too early and suddenly. And a lot of people mentioned the feeling of resentment. Do you hear that a lot as well? Which I completely understand, because I think I can absolutely see why they would feel resentment. Not a nice feeling at all. But you're nodding to say yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, my friend, well, I suppose this was a friend as well, but a female friend lost her ex-husband, and they were still close because they had children. And I'd been friends with both of them. And he was only in his 50s.
Wow.
And again, from contracting COVID to dying was 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So, again, there's a lot of resentment. And again, not getting into the politics of it, but we all know what was going on elsewhere
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
we were abiding by the rules and all of that. So I can understand that there is a whole load of resentment there about, the pandemic, how people were treated, what we
Mm-hmm.
had to deal with.
Yeah.
And so it's difficult. And I think that's kind of one side, but I would say even COVID notwithstanding,
Mm.
and it's not a nice thing to admit, but I have been, and I think probably more in the early days, resentful of couples.
Yeah.
Because suddenly you're just going like, well, my partner's not here, my husband's not
Mhm.
here,
And I completely understand that.
and
I,
it's not nice.
yes.
And I didn't like myself, but in those dark, dark days, I would say, hand on heart, that is genuinely what I felt.
Yeah. And do you know what? Loads of people have said that to me and then said that they felt guilty for feeling like that.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So, but that's quite a natural feeling, I would assume.
yeah, yeah. And I think what I have found about this whole sort of time since David died is that I own my own feelings, whether they're positive or negative. So I own the grief.
Yeah.
And when I was away over our wedding, what would have been our wedding anniversary, there were a couple of times I cried, and it was in front of people, and it wasn't sobbing, but I didn't kind of hold back and apologize. I just said, look, my
Yeah.
emotions have got a bit, have just overwhelmed me here.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is why. I've got tissue, I'm kind of dabbing my eyes, and people were fine with that. And so I own it. And I think that's another thing that we tend to do is we repress it because we don't want other people to feel uncomfortable. So
Yeah.
again, as Brits, do
That's
we
true.
kind of just pat somebody on the shoulder? Oh, there, you'll be all
Yeah. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Or they
Yeah.
kind
Yeah.
of stand around going, oh God, I wish you'd stop crying.
Yeah, it's that stiff upper lip again, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I always say to people, like, if you feel the urge to cry, it's you need to cry. Like, it's your body's reaction to something. And I think we're all get very guilty of holding tears in at some point. But then feelings are okay.
Yeah, I think again, I've kind of accepted it more and just again, like you say, not holding it in, it's not healthy.
Mm,
Do you know it? You have to let it out.
yeah,
Otherwise, I
absolutely.
think it will just kind of manifest itself elsewhere with, disease and as a
Hmm.
brain coach yourself, you'll know the impact that can have on your brain, your mental health, and therefore your physical health and well-being as well.
That's it. Now, what about, you must have felt some anger as well afterwards because it was so sudden as well.
Absolutely. I think you get angry at the world, really. I was angry at David for dying and leaving me. How could
Mm,
he? Angry just at the world. Again, it's kind of like that. You don't blame other people, but you're kind of going, but what it a bit of like, why me, why us, why David?
yeah,
Um, but again, that's one of the first, the second kind of stage in the Club of Ross. You get denial and then anger. You want to like lash out. I didn't get physically lash out, but I think I did at that point kind of internalize all of this anger. Again,
right,
that's not healthy, really.
right.
The best,
So,
once I kind of got over myself, what I did was just do extra long walks with the dog and just kind of
yes,
like have a right old conversation in my head and come back feeling better.
yeah. So, what stage comes after the anger then?
Oh, you're going to tell me, you're going to ask me now, aren't you?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, where did we get?
yeah.
Let me look. I should know it by heart by the amount of times I've used it. Kubler. If I could spell. There we go. So we get denial, then anger, then bargaining. So we go, if I do this, we start to try and find ways of kind of bargaining with ourselves.
Right, okay.
And then we can get depression into that. So again, that's right at the bottom. And then as we
Mm,
start to come up, we can start of the term is acceptance, but it's not like really accepting.
yeah.
It's more about we accept that the situation has happened and we can't do anything about it. So that's
Mm,
kind of as we've kind of come through the grief curve, and you're kind of at that point, you're kind of accepting that you're living on your own now, for example, that you're having to live this life, you're having to do these things and live differently. But like I said, you could still slide all the way back at any point. So
yeah,
it's not like cyclical. Once you get through, you go, right, okay, thanks very much. I'm fine now.
yeah.
You might. It's different for everybody. You
Yeah,
might
yeah.
you
Mm,
might feel like that, but my experiences is that I can feel that I'm kind of like, really doing really well. And then like happened a few weeks ago, comes out of nowhere. Other times I can feel, something just bubbling. And
yeah,
I'm going like, oh, there's definitely something. So I put a really sad film on just to kind of help things and then just have a really good sob for an hour and a half.
yeah.
Um,
That was it, yeah.
and then feel much better afterwards.
Yeah, that's so right. Well, when I was on holiday last, I spotted on Facebook that you'd gone on holiday.
Yeah, I did.
Where did you go?
I went to Oman, which is our favorite place. We've been there many, many, many times. We're so lucky. And the actual timing was particularly pertinent for me because it would have been our 20th wedding anniversary.
Right.
And whilst we hadn't actually talked specifically about that, I could have envisioned because we'd been in Oman before on previous wedding anniversaries that, had we planned
Mm,
and had that opportunity, we likely would have gone And so I went to the same hotel. I connected with some friends who knew about David. So it was actually really lovely, some of my friends, and sort of revisited some of the places that we would have gone to and just really enjoyed it. I was expecting real floods of tears and kind of like, quite clutching my pearls. Oh my gosh. But
Yeah, yeah.
actually, I just felt really warm and not quite physically hugged, but I felt really comfortable and loved whilst I was there. And then on our wedding anniversary evening at dinner, um, kind of silently toasted
Mm.
David, happy anniversary. And it was just really, really lovely. It really, really was.
Yeah, I wanted to come and find you and give you a big hug. I'm not gonna lie. I thought, what a beautiful post, but you are a beautiful person inside
Thank
and out.
you.
So when you work with people, are they at a certain kind of stage on that chart that we was talking about when they actually come to you and say, like, I do need a bit of guidance?
I think they could be anywhere on it because it could, I mean, it could shift in one day. You could be all over the place. Um, I think by the time people are coming, they kind of can see that there is a future for them.
Right.
They
Okay.
still might be feeling guilty about, they're still alive and they've got the future and the person doesn't. But I think coming to me to say, okay, well, let's look at, where you are, how are you feeling, what's going
Mm-hmm,
on. Give me the hit. We're not going to dwell on the past and go over and over. That's for you to do. I'm
mm-hmm.
more looking at, so what does your future hold?
Yeah.
And if people can't look, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, where if you think about when you're goal planning, you do tend to look, what's the next 12 months and then break it down. If I can get people to look at, right, what about the next week?
Yeah.
What are 3 things you can do in a week? That's too much. What about tomorrow?
Yeah. Because I suppose that is the most difficult part, isn't it? Because, like I say, we've probably had plans and then we've had
Mm,
to change them. So I suppose that'd be a fear-based thing as well. Like, do people go, well, I've already made plans and they've gone wrong, so I'm scared of making other
yeah,
plans.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I
So it's
get
kind of talking through and sort of getting understanding the what's, the whys, and well, okay, again, just shortening that plan,
yeah,
just about one day.
yeah. Because I suppose
Um,
that's where the confidence starts to grow as well.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think it is just a real tiny, tiny incremental steps to, well, we did,
Mm,
Wednesday to Thursday. Let's just check in. How about we take a big step and go right through to Sunday? What are you going to do this weekend?
yeah,
Because again, I can only go based on my experience. If I didn't have something in the diary, and it might not necessarily have been meeting up with somebody just to go, I'm going to walk into the village and have a
mm,
cup of coffee.
yeah, yeah,
That's the thing. I'm going to go for a drive and go for a walk.
yeah,
And just get people to think about small things.
yeah,
It might just be, I'm going to phone a friend.
mm,
In that, the people who might be feeling awkward about contacting us, how about if we reach out and just go, oh,
yeah,
hi, I was just thinking about you, and taking away some of that awkwardness so they don't have to ring up and go, I was just ringing to see how you're doing.
yeah,
Hoping that you're not going to start crying or say, oh my God, I feel terrible. So I think just asking people to say, could you contact one friend?
yeah,
If you don't want to chat, how about just texting them?
yeah. Just pop them a
Yeah.
message.
So again, it's
Yeah, absolutely.
really, really, really small steps to look to, and that's still the future. And then once people get confident about knowing that, they can plan a week ahead,
Mm,
we can start looking at 2 weeks, 3 weeks,
yeah, yeah,
and just build it. And again, there might be a bit of regression, they might panic
yeah,
about it. And so we just dial it back again and start with, okay, so what can you do tomorrow? What can you do
yeah,
the day after?
yeah. I love that. I absolutely love that. Do you, because when we work with people with like past traumatic events, and we regularly say to people, right, this is where I struggle. So I like to take your take on this, because if it's been a traumatic event, it's like, right, what good things have come from that? And that works in many scenarios. However, I've always kind of pulled away from that question when it's involved a loss, because can you find, is that wrong to go, well, this has happened and this has happened and this has happened? Is that right to do in that situation?
Yeah, I think from your point of view, it is that kind of awkwardness, and I feel a bit wrong asking this question.
Yeah.
But I would say, if you to have asked me, if you were bold enough to ask me, to go, what positive thinking out of that is that I don't put anything off now. So that's a positive thing.
Yeah.
If I want to go away
Yeah.
for a weekend, if I want to go away for a week, again, with the dog, or I can get a dog sitter. Well, even this year, we haven't been to gigs for years and years. There was always like a reason we're going again. We're going to do it. We're going to do it. And I think probably last autumn. So I live in the East Riding of Yorkshire, and Bridlington, as Bridlington Spa, it's a really good venue. And there was Example, so it's a guy I follow on the socials.
Yeah.
He was opening there, and I just booked. And then and I went, like, that was for February, and I went, the universe will find a puppy sitter to look after the dog. That's great. And then on the back of that, I went, and I'm going to go and see Sarah Millican in June. And I just booked it, and then started to think about who's going to look after the dog. And it all
Yeah.
came true. And I
Yeah.
think just doing that, and again, kind of thinking about that, was like, I would have just got, oh, well, I would really like to do it, but I'll maybe book tomorrow, or I'll try and get a sitter, or I'll try and do this. No, I booked it and then set everything up, and it all worked out really, really well.
I love that. Because, like I
I
said,
was in the mosh pit, Amy. I was in the mosh pit giving it all this.
yeah, I absolutely love that,
On
because
my
you're so
own.
right. You're so right. It's like, yeah, like, we'd love to do that. Like, admittedly, like, I've written a bucket list. The chances of me like going, right, okay, I'm booking this and I'm booking it now, it's very slim, unless I just go, do you know what? Like, I don't know what's around the corner, because we are a nation of people that go, I'd really love to do that, and then we forget to book it, or something comes up, or we overthink it. We are a nation of overthinkers.
Yeah.
It's sad, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, even my trip to Oman, I was looking at my vision board from January for this
Yeah.
year, and Oman was on it as a kind of a wish list thing, and I talked about it, and I talked about it, and I talked about it, and a friend went, so are you going then? And I went, yeah, I will, but I've got to think about this. And then I just went, right, I'm going to book it.
Yeah.
And then try and find a friend to look after the dog.
Worry about the small print afterwards. Like,
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
that's what we need to do, because we'll always come up with an excuse. With the dog, or you haven't got time, or it's the wrong day of the week, or the weather won't be great. It's something, isn't it?
Yeah, I think once it's in your diary, and this is what I found, like, first of all, with this big step to go to see Example, it was in the diary. And so I made other things happen. I made me ask the question, decide who might look after him. And instead of, oh, well, nobody could, I really don't want to ask. I just asked, are you free on this date? Can you have me? Needs an overnighter. Yes.
How was Example anyway? Because I missed out on
tremendous.
Tickets.
It was tremendous. Like I say, right in the mosh pit as well. Oh, I was giving it with all the young ones.
Oh, fair play. Did you actually feel empowered? You know, when you book the tickets?
Oh God,
and you were
yeah.
like, yes, I've done it.
Yeah.
Because I do believe it's like empowering for anybody in any situation.
Yeah, it was tremendous. Absolutely tremendous.
And you often find they're the best times as well, where you've just done it on a whim.
Yeah.
What have you got else lined up that you've spontaneously gone, right, I'm doing that?
Well, I'm just doing a bit of research. I'm waiting for some work dates to kind of settle in for next year, but we got a camper van, we being me and the dog.
Yeah.
And so we've been going around the UK, kind of, you're getting used to it and everything. And so next year we're definitely going to go into Europe.
Oh, I love that.
So probably the Netherlands, because they're really, really kind of geared towards, camping and caravanning and stuff. So I just need to get the dates from the universities where I'm working for. So I know when I can have 2 or 3 week block, then
Okay.
organize the ferry, and then just
Yeah.
book our sites.
Oh, I love that.
And then worry about the pet passport and his inject. Don't worry about that
Yeah, yeah,
then.
yeah. That's the small print again that we're going
Yeah.
back to, aren't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, don't worry about that. So when you work with people, is it a group coaching? Is it one-on-one? Is it a specific amount of time, or is it just as long as they need?
It has been one-on-one, but I'm now looking to start a 28-day group, just as a tester to see how people work with it. It will be online.
Mm,
And just particularly looking at in the run up to Christmas, because again, we've got things that can trigger.
yeah,
Christmas can be pretty triggering. And I think that a lot of people may be like me in that initially you're kind of watching a date and every time you turn your calendar or you open your phone in your diary and you're like, it's nearly our wedding anniversary, it's nearly his birthday, it's nearly Christmas, and all you do is like all this doom and gloom just again subsumes you, and all you can watch is with trepidation as this date gets closer. And then you kind of build yourself up and, oh my gosh, I don't know how I'm going to cope and all of that. So for me, this 28 day was start on the 24th of November to try and help people get into the mindset where that they feel actually more positive around Christmas, or
yeah,
maybe at least not as bad as they was expecting to. And again, getting things in place. So what might be the trigger? It might be sitting around the table and that person's not there.
not there.
And
Yeah,
again, it's that awkwardness. I found the awkwardness around the family table of like, do we go absent friends? Do we just ignore the fact that he's not there?
yeah, yeah,
um, and it's kind of again, it's maybe a bit we're kind of treading on eggshells. And so it could be that, it could be that you would all of the traditions that you had. Did you put the tree up
yeah,
together? Have you got special ornaments? Did you do a special Christmas Eve thing?
yeah,
And I think people can start to really beat themselves up and get really, really, really kind of, well, sad, obviously, but really quite traumatized and hung up on it. Whereas I think
yeah,
we've got things that we can work with over 4 weeks to get things put in place. And again, as a group to help each other. Again,
yeah.
kind of, it's not the kind of self-help therapy looking back all of the time. It's like, oh, yes, I had that, or I was thinking about that. Amy, what are you going to do? Well, I thought I'd do that. And then the other person, that might actually be a good idea. I'll try that.
Do you know what? Yeah, I like the idea of a group thing as well, because not only that, so you're going to be with everybody else that can resonate with you, kind of all on the same journey. Plus, you're meeting new people at the same time. Absolutely amazing. And you all kind of replanning together. I think that's perfect.
So I'm going to see how it goes. It'll be my first.
Mm,
I can understand people might have trepidations about, oh my gosh, and because it is a very sensitive subject. Um, but I'm hoping if I can kind of help to people to see the positives in it, in the
yeah,
group kind of situation, that we
yeah,
can all benefit from positives rather than drag each other down and end up like, oh, woe is me.
yeah. Do you know what I was going to say that because you get a lot of these, like, let's say, self-help groups. You get them all over the place, and I've been to some before about being a carer. I'm not going to name which group it is. I'll be really honest. It didn't do me any favors because I felt worse when I came out. And I can imagine that'll be the same if you're grieving or like if you're suffering mentally, because if you're grouping a group of people together that aren't doing too good with no direction how to get out of so I went a couple of times and then I stopped because it was like the first time I was like, maybe it's, it's new, and that maybe that's why I'm feeling a bit. After about the third time, I was like, no, it's actually making me feel worse. Like I'm coming out with the fear of God in me here. And I mean, it's great. The people were lovely, but there was no solution there.
Yeah.
So I think what you are offering is worth its weight in gold.
Oh, good. Good. It's nice to hear an outside view. I think,
yes,
even though I'm positive, there is always that kind of, well, it might not work for all the reasons that I think it won't work. But that's nice to hear. So we'll see. I'll give it a trial and see how it goes.
So where can people find you if they if they go, right, you know what, this is what I need? Because the great thing about you is people can resonate with you very easily.
Thank you.
So where can they find you? So like, right, I'm really interested in this 28-day.
They can find me on the socials. So I'm on Instagram. Instagram is Dr. Karen Bright, PhD. And on Facebook, bizarrely, I'm Karen Bright International Limited, which is my company.
I like to confuse everybody as well with different social media
people on their toes. Yeah. And then in my bio, there's a booking link for In Real Life, but I'm busy working on that. The website's still under construction because I keep changing my mind. Or again, DM me, WhatsApp me.
Did you say you're writing a book then?
Oh yeah, and I'm writing a book as well. I'd forgotten I committed to do that. I've got the outline.
Tell me about this.
The book will be, I suppose, the basis of how I coach, and then also there'll be kind of a workbook element to it. So again, it's a different way of people working with me who don't want any kind of in real life contact or online contact. They rather do it themselves. So it will be, it's not step by step, because I don't think that's helpful for anybody. Excuse me.
Yeah.
But, certainly there will be an element. There'll be check-ins as though I was coaching them.
Yeah.
And again, looking about grief, looking about bereavement, thinking about it in context of culture, different cultures, because I don't expect that everyone who's going to potentially buy the book is, English, British.
No, it's going to go worldwide.
It's going to go, of course it's, put it out there. So, considering other cultures as well, and thinking about, we can do things differently, and perhaps we can learn from other cultures. So again, in cultures where there's no holds barred, if you're feeling grief, you just let it all out, perhaps we can learn from that, for example. So it will be step by step, looking at grief, looking at bereavement, not bogged down in like the history of it and all of the theory around it, but just so people can get a better feel for it and understand that everything that they're feeling and going through is normal.
Yeah.
And not to kind of take the stigma out of grief and bereavement, so that people aren't going to tippy-toe around us. And I think I would hope that people who have read the book will actually feel kind of empowered in themselves and take, again, control of their own destiny, their own journey, and their own sort of way forward post, the death of somebody or the post-event.
Yeah, I love that. I've got one more question for you that everybody struggles with. Yeah. So don't let me down.
Okay.
Karen, tell me 3 good things about yourself.
3 good things. Ooh. Right. Well, I am by nature very positive. Very positive, even, in adversity. I'm very positive. I'm a good person to have in a crisis. When stuff hits the fan, I'm really level-headed, and we'd go like, right, there's a situation. Let's sort it out. Who do we need to call? What do we need to do? Who needs to do what? And another good thing about I've got a really odd sense of humor.
Divulge some information here.
Yeah, I guess just a bit odd. But, yeah.
We need to go on a night out, because I think I've got a bit of an odd sense of humour. I'm the person, somebody falls over, before I ask them if they're all right, I'm laughing.
Yes.
Do you know, it's not a very nice trait to have, I don't think. I was like, oh, I'm going to hell. I'm
No,
going to hell.
no, I'm a dreadful giggler. It takes nothing, even at my ripe old age of 56, I just go, just like hysterical giggles can
Yeah,
just set me
at the
away.
wrong time.
Oh God, yes, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, we definitely
Yes.
want a night out.
But again, it kind of goes full circle to it. Imagine being at a funeral and getting the giggles. That's not great, is it?
No, it's not.
Not great. No, no.
I love that. You needed to add another one as well because
That was
you are
three.
spontaneous. No, yeah, no, but I'm going to add a fourth because you're spontaneous and you don't put things off. That's a really good trait to have.
Oh, right. Thank you. Yeah.
Oh,
Not
yeah.
anymore. I don't.
Oh,
If I want
well,
to do it, I'm gonna do it.
yeah. So, with that in mind, when's the book going to be finished?
31st of December 2024.
Nice. I
I
love
have to do
that.
it now.
Yeah, you're going to have to do it now. I'm going to bug you. I'm going to check in with you every week. How far have you got, Karen?
Oh no. Oh no.
I love that. Well, I'll put all your social media links in the podcast
Thank
description. So if
you.
anybody wants a link, just click below. Thank you for being such an amazing guest. You are a beautiful person inside and out, and I love the work that you do. And you know how you said you were good in a crisis?
Yeah.
I know where I'm going to be ringing from now on.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure and a privilege to be invited on. Thank you so much. I
Thank
really
you for being a
enjoyed it.
fabulous guest.
Oh, thank
Take
you.
care, my lovely.
You too.